Hello. Welcome. I'll see if I can log into the live stream and invite people, and then we'll begin. See what kind of luck that we have. That seems pretty good. Okay. I think I did my part. Welcome. So I have a lot I want to talk about and say. Didn't really think it through, but I did make a couple notes, so hopefully some of the instances I won't forget because I can see them right in front of me. And so I think maybe I should just start with kind of how I am, how I teach, how my school is, and that is to say that it's very informal, rather laissez-faire. I take seriously the fun that we have, but I am definitely not a traditionalist, though I practice traditional arts, and the way that I do them is very Taoist, and I'm happy with that. It works. It's meaningful to me. It's purposeful. It's conscious. It's sincere. But there are other ways to doing it, and in the last little while, couple of weeks, I've been noticing instances where it's done differently. And it kind of suggests to me, like, what goes missing for me, what else there is, other ways to do it, which I know intellectually and I've experienced emotionally, but for whatever reason in the last couple of weeks, that's kind of hit home. And so the title of this is a Darśana, and that's a Sanskrit term which means witnessing, it means the non-mundane coming into view, maybe not just with the eyes. And the way Darśana was taught to me is that it's something that you take, so it isn't going to a class with a teacher or guru, which is its own thing. I'm going to a class, I'm taking a workshop, I'm studying, I'm a devotee, I'm a disciple, what have you. Taking Darśana is being in the presence of the teacher, or maybe the enlightened being or something like that, the saint, whatever, terms work for you, guru, whatever. And the idea is that, let's say it's an enlightened being, just being in their presence with your eyes open, again, just metaphorically is fine. Being in their presence, there are myriad lessons, and perhaps there are lessons that don't get taught overtly, right? In other words, the only way that you get them is by taking Darśana, right? Observing how a teacher is in the world, interacts in the world, manifests in the world, exists, how they move, how they breathe, how they talk, how they sing, how they scratch themselves, how they eat, how they smile, how they shift, how they whatever. So Darśana isn't about, well, let me sit with this person and look for that clue and pay attention to when they do this. But it is being present for, open to, and observing, witnessing how that person manifests, beyond the overt teachings. Like, class time, let's begin, here's what we're working on, or working on, episode, exercise 6 out of the 20 or something like that. That's overt. And it's great, it's fine, it's necessary. Darshana is something different. And I take Darshana quite seriously. I'll tell you a story of this. I had a couple students who were quite devoted, quite involved, quite committed, but still younger, and we had an opportunity to study with a teacher of some of my teachers, so the grand teacher, so they were all excited, and they paid their money and reserved their spot and signed up and, bought the t-shirt and got ready and asked me a bunch of questions. And I said, all the basic stuff, right? Like, be polite, do your practice, take a notebook, have some water, bring a spare t-shirt, just all those kind of basic stuffs for workshop. And they were, very devoted, very committed, very sincere, very, gung-ho, and gung-ho about gung fu, I guess. And they said, well, what else can we do? What's the secret? What's the special sauce? And they said, well, pack your own lunch. I said, why should I pack my own lunch? We're all going to go out to lunch. There's an hour and a half break, and we'll go to a local restaurant or something. And so here's what's likely to happen. We'll do the morning session, and then the host will say, well, we're done now. We'll come back here. We'll meet here at 1:30, and then we'll start session 2. And everybody will go off to different places in town, and they'll have their little cliques and their clacks and their whatever group went out to Chinese will become its own little group, and they'll have their own inside stories and jokes and bonding time, which is important and valuable and healthy, perhaps necessary. And then you're going to come back, and the teacher will be there, and they'll say, let's start session 2. And I said, what's going to happen is, probably me, but somebody's going to go out and get the teacher something to eat and bring it to him, and the teacher's going to stay in the studio and have, some food, probably not going to run out. I said, if you have your own food, when they said it's time to take a break, you don't have anywhere you have to go. So if it's appropriate or you're invited, you can just stay there and eat your food. So take care of your nutritional needs and not have to leave the room while the teacher's there. I said, well, what's going to happen during lunch? Oh, probably he's just going to have a soup and an ice cream, and that's it. Well, then why don't we go out to lunch with all these great martial artists and have a whole experience and enjoy the Chinese food there? So you can do that, that's fine. But if you are in the room with the teacher, you don't know what story he's going to tell. You don't know what bonding is going to happen. You don't know what laugh you're going to have. You don't know what teaching is going to happen, right? But if it does happen, you won't be there for it if you go to Chinese. So to make the best use of your time, have your lunch with you, have nowhere else to go, have your notepad with you, sit right at his feet. If it's not appropriate and he says, please sit over here, or I want somebody else in front, fair enough. But if he begins to ask for a volunteer, your hand goes up. If he says everybody take a seat, you sit right next to him so you don't miss a word. Look right in his eyes. You don't have anywhere else to go. Pay attention. Take everything in that you can, right? Don't be impolite, right? Don't be pushy, but take those opportunities. And it could be that you have 90 more minutes with the teacher than most of the people at the workshop. And it could be that nothing really comes of it. But chances are, some really cool story happens, or he gets up and he's, let me just show you this thing, and you get that inside track, that really important information, that really inspiring bit of wisdom. And that's taking Darshana. So, and they say, well, what do we do? What do we do? I say, I don't know what you do, but be present. Don't have any worldly needs draw you out, like socializing or food. Try your best to go to the bathroom very quickly, have your notebook, not somewhere else, right here, so you can just sit there, look up at them, and take in whatever there is to take in. So that was kind of how I taught Darshan to those people in a sort of non-religious context, which is what I am. So in my school, we didn't really have certificates, and we didn't have these big, testing panels. We didn't have the yearly celebration of the school, like the school's anniversary or the teacher's birthday. We didn't have that. We didn't have these sort of ordinary calendric occasions and celebrations and rituals. Just wasn't. We went there and we sweat and we bruised and we asked questions and we sweat more and we practiced, and that's what we did. We rarely went out to dinner with my teacher, the teacher who I'm thinking of now. Bruce Dearborn Walker was his name. But I've certainly had other teachers where it was kind of regular. We'd go out to eat and we'd have those sort of social times as well, but not my primary teacher. And in fact, not my secondary teacher, not my Kung Fu teacher. I don't know that I've ever gone out to dinner with him. Maybe not. So it just wasn't how I was kind of brought up in the arts, if we can say brought up. Another thing I want to talk about is that I don't teach. It's not my lineage. It's not my history. It's not my ritual. Teaching people to bow to the studio space or the altar or anything in the school. It's not how I came up in the arts. So I generally will bow at the start and the end of a class. That isn't to say that that's the only way to do it, the best way to do it. All I can say fairly is I know why I do it, and that's enough for me, and I have a good reason for it. You have good reasons for doing it your way, and they're just as good as my reason. That's fine. To me, it's important that we know why, and that it's a good reason. If it's a non-conscious practice, then I might want to argue with it. But I don't ask students to bow to the studio space, which you might have traditionally seen people bow when they come onto the mat, bow when they leave the mat, bow when they enter the studio, bow when they leave the studio. I personally bow when I come in the studio and I bow when I leave, never with a hat on. And sometimes a student will ask me, like, hey, I saw that you bowed when you came in. Am I supposed to? How do I do it? And I said, there's not a supposed to here in this regard. I can tell you why I do, why it's meaningful and in fact important to me. And if that happens to match your feelings and relationship to the space, you're welcome to do it, perhaps in your own way, perhaps how you bow is fine, or I'm happy to show you how I bow, because I know how to bow, I know how to teach it, I know why, but I don't want to enforce it. For me, it isn't like something to pass on and make sure everybody does. But I'm not that strict about that either. I do teach people how to bow at other times and I enforce that. Like, here's our rule and I can tell you why. But at any rate, to me, that's a little bit related to that Darshana idea. Like, it's about me marking a differentiation between the mundane world and the sacred world. And taking Darshan is marking this state of witness with a teacher. So I've said all that. I want to say some more. This is not a Q&A, although I suppose if you do have questions, type them in the comments, and if I remember, I'll try and read them and respond to them. But if I forget that, maybe the comments will stay for a while and I'll respond to them another way at another time. So I'll try and do this next few parts without names. I apologize in advance if I use the names, because they're stories of real people and the name might just come out. It's not my intention to point anybody out or pick anybody. And this all kind of gets to the general kind of feeling that I've been having for the last few weeks. So a couple days ago, really, maybe a week, let's say it's a week ago, I came out to the studio, and I think the student was here already and she was about to have a class, but because of COVID, we've been having class outdoors pretty exclusively. And so I must have come in the studio to, bring the iPad in or something like that, put some stock. Oh, I had tourniquets that I had. So the tourniquets came in, so I brought them in here to put on the for sale shelf. So I think I'd just come in with the tourniquets and she was in here. And I thought, maybe you're just putting your stuff down, even though it's not raining. was just wondering. And she kind of pointed out to me how all on her own, this wasn't from a conversation I had, she had said how important the studio physical space had been to her, and that she was just, let's say, newly noticing it, or keenly aware of it recently, something like that. She put it how she put it. I'm just paraphrasing. But anyway, she felt like she was almost teary, and she's like, I literally just came in here to, I forgot how she put it, but to thank the space, the physical space. And I thought, oh, let me just back out and give you the space. This is between you and the space. It's not for me to be here. Obviously, I was very moved, and that's, really, wonderful. I only wish I hadn't kind of interrupted it, so it could have been as pristine as it could have been. So that was very moving. A week ago, I had a student come by with a gift, and the gift was a tree, a living plant, and actually a tree that I've always wanted to caretake. And he told me that his teacher from way back, who had, there's visa stuff and illness and so forth. And I don't need to give you the details, but at any rate, he stopped teaching. So let's just say he retired. And that's how he came to me, because he wanted to keep training, but his teacher was unable to. And he's a great student, really committed and devoted and talented and all that. And he came to give me a plant, and I thought, well, that was really nice and out of the blue and special. And then he let me know that he was going to stop training with me, which of course is, for a teacher is always like, oh no, like really painful. But he explained that his teacher was going to begin teaching again, or I guess his teacher's son, under the auspices of his teacher, was going to begin training again. And he felt that that was his place, that was his sort of duty, his responsibility, his to continue there if there was a way to continue. And I thought, boy, that's like the perfect answer. I mean, that is as good as it gets. If that's where you feel you need to be, that's where you should be. Will I miss the income? Sure. Will I miss the time with him? Sure. Will I miss watching him mature? Yeah, of course, sure. But many students I've found just kind of dissipate, disappear, dissolve. Every once in a while, a student will tell me I can't keep training for a variety of reasons, and that happens. And again, it always hurts. It hurts the wallet. It hurts the heart. And that is what it is. And I've come to understand that and accept it. In other words, I don't spend time wishing it was a different way, because it is how humans are. But in this case, to me, it felt like he just stopped training perfectly. He came in with a gift, which of course is unnecessary, but just really thoughtful and beautiful, like a tree that would grow a certain way, like a student. So I'm excited to put that in the ground and care for it. It's a ginkgo tree. And he let me know directly, I won't be training, and here's why. Do you have any questions? I'm sorry, I'll miss it. I'll keep training. And I thought, boy, that's just a really wonderful relationship to a space. And for him, I think that the tree represented his relationship to the space here, not just the studio building, but the farm grounds, right? And he mentioned how beautiful it is here to train. And I think that was his kind of representing the relationship to the physical space. So, exceedingly meaningful. On a related note, every time I have a new student, I plant something for them on the farm. Most people don't know that, but that's something that I do as a tradition. I read their intake sheet where they put their deepest wish, and then I plant something. If I can, something somewhat related to that idea, and other times it's just what needs planting, and that becomes representational. So everybody that studied with me has something growing here, if those growing things lived, I suppose. So the next is I had a student come in to the studio for the first time in a while. I'm going to say 2 weeks ago, something like that, and did the class. and class was over. And then maybe he texted me or emailed, I don't remember exactly. But he mentioned to me that when he was in the studio, he saw the picture of my teacher hanging up on the wall. And that had been his teacher. He studied with that teacher before studying with me. And I said, yeah, it's great that I could get the picture up. And he said he'd like to, I don't know, have a copy of it, I guess, you know, if I could reprint it or find the original or something like that. And I thought, boy, that's such a great, urge to have to have darshan with your teacher, if you will, or just have a good picture of your teacher. And I know that I have precious few photos of my teacher, and probably even fewer of my teacher with me. Didn't do much in the way of photos. There wasn't much in the way of social media, or everybody taking thousands of pictures every day. And of course, his focus was on the training. It wasn't on how you look. It was just train. Can we hit harder? Can we study more? Can we go over that again? It wasn't about going out to dinner, although he'd have a good laugh and everything. So I thought that was such a cool thing where, he noticed the picture and then he had this urge to have a version of it. I suspect that's because he doesn't have any pictures of him, or many. I don't think it was a case of the picture I have of him is so great he needs that one. More likely it was he doesn't have any or many, or certainly hadn't seen that one before. And that's up here on the altar too, a version of it. He's passed on now in a couple of years, and it's tragic for me every single day. And as I said, I'm not a particularly traditional, sort of ceremonial kind of person. And so when he passed away, I found the picture, printed it, mounted it, and then I wanted to hang it above the kamidana, the altar at the front of the school. To me, it was the only place for it, there. So students facing forward, that's what they see. But it also felt a little weird because he wouldn't have his pictures up. He wouldn't name his school after himself. It wasn't like there was a bunch of other pictures of people on the altar already, and now it's just his time to go up. It isn't really the sort of way that I came up in these arts, having people's pictures up. I'd have representational objects and totems and stuff. But at any rate, it still felt right, but it also felt weird. And it still feels weird and also right. Whenever somebody comes in from the old days, and they might just be visiting or something, they're not just necessarily here to study and sign up. But I'll make a point of bringing them in, showing them Bruce's picture. His name is Bruce Walker, but he was just Bruce. He was never Sifu Walker or any titles. Again, that gets to that whole idea of not standing on ceremony. But anyway, just Bruce is as respectful and loving as I can be. It's just Bruce. And so I'll try and bring him in and show him the picture, maybe let him take a picture with it if they want or something, but just let him know, like, here's Bruce, here's the man that you know in this place of respect and presence. Couple more things. Just about sort of the physical space, what does the physical space mean, what do the ancestors mean? And are they so different? Is the physical space that we inhabit, that we sanctify, so different from the ancestors? In theory, every one of my actions, every one of my thoughts, every one of my words, every one of my breaths is related to my ancestors. From a DNA point of view, we can make an argument that sure, that all led to this, but we're talking about ancestors outside of DNA, generally, right? In the martial arts, you might certainly have been in a maternalistic line of Simus, and that's fine. But generally, we're talking about a found and built family, we come into a lineage that we were not born into. And I want to devote myself fully enough that my actions all reflect my ancestors in these arts. I want to sincerely develop, determine, develop, and direct my every action such that it represents the best of the ancestors in these arts. That's a tall order. I'm going to fail at it every day. I get that. But what does the physical space mean? Is it just a building? A big focus of my teaching in the arts is about sanctification. So those of you that study with me that will click into a whole bunch of other lessons. What does it mean to have your bare foot on the studio floor? I guess what I should tell is a story, since we're talking about the physical space, about this building. When I moved in here, my teacher, who's a general contractor, one of my teachers, Christopher J. Withington, but again, he was just always Chris. He was never C for Withington. He was a student of Bruce Walker. Bruce Walker, by the way, it's my understanding, began in 1986 as a teacher at Silent Dragon Schools of Kung Fu and Tai Chi. I don't know how accurate that number is, but I have a memory that he began in 68. So I think that's right, 68 is when he began. But at any rate, Chris Withington, my Kung Fu teacher, Bruce Walker was my Kung Fu and Tai Chi or Nei Chuan teacher. Both of them came to study with me later, which is pretty humbling and inspiring. Really an extraordinary twist in my life. Anyway, when I moved in here, this just had a carpet on the floor, a little thin sort of commercial carpet. And I said to Chris, I'd always wanted a bamboo floor. You're a contractor, I'd love you to put in a bamboo floor. And it's just like a square room, no sort of trapdoors or plumbing, or it's pretty straightforward. And he said to me, Steve, you don't need me to put the floor in. I've been doing this for a long time. It'll cost you a lot of money. I can refer you to a couple people who do a great job. It's a very simple job. You can have anybody put it in. And I'll get you a good person and you'll be fine. But you don't need to pay me for that. When you have something more involved or complex or custom, I'm your guy, happy to help, which of course is beautiful. And I said to him, I said, I need you to understand something. You gave me my foundation in the martial arts. I'm now moving my school, renaming it here to what I hope is my forever home. And in my view, I have one shot to put a floor in, because after that, we're having classes and the schedules make it difficult. I was like, I just want to get the floor in before I get students in on the floor. Then it's done. I said, I'm moving. I would love for you to physically, not just metaphorically, give me my foundation for my practice. And I'd like it to be bamboo. And he immediately understood what I meant and said, yes, I'll do it. And he did do it. I don't know how much it cost me compared to if somebody else did it. It's not important to me. What was important to me is the meaning of my Kung Fu teacher putting a bamboo floor in for me that I will walk on barefoot every day and my students will walk on. And we will also bleed on and sweat on and bruise on and fall on and everything else. But this will be a physical foundation for our studies. Whereas he had previously given me a metaphorical foundation for my studies. And so to me, that meaning of that physical space was deeply important, and I was ready to argue for it if he had said no. But he got it right away, and then he put the floor in. And of course, he did a wonderful job, and I'm super happy with it, and it's beautiful and all the rest. But for me, I don't lose sight of that ever. Every day I step in here, gonna cry. Oh. Every day I step in and I bow. And I'm standing on the floor that my teacher installed for me. And probably most of my students don't know that. It's just a floor. Hey, it's nice. It works. It feels good. Who did it? It's probably give very little, if any, thought to it. If they look down, they're probably giving thought to their stance, not the floor. And that's fine. They don't need anything else. Again, I don't try and assert these stories. I don't try and enforce them and make people memorize them and repeat them and stand on ceremony. But there is truth in the stories, and there is value in the stories. And I don't forget the story of this floor ever. Anyway, another story about the space. We're here on the farm. I have another student who has had a really tough time the last few years, maybe for many years, and I'm not quite sure aware of it. And she's a really devoted student, really, really talented and attentive student, committed, and she, studies the internal arts with me and meditation as well. And she's come more than a few times to not to have a session, not to have a class, not to ask a question, but just to come to the property and sit by the pond, no picnic blanket. Sometimes I'll catch her and I'll walk over and I'll chat and just sort of check in. Do you need a hug or advice or just a shoulder or an ear or what have you, and other times not. But it's her coming to the space that we've all created as students here to decompress, to chill, to settle, to quiet, to practice, to meditate, to listen to the birds and watch the clouds, whatever it is she's doing. I don't need to know, we don't need to be specific, but the idea is that she's coming to the space because she needs to grieve, she needs to release, she needs to rest, she needs to reset, whatever her words might be. And that's not a class I get paid for, that's not really work that I do, but to me that's so important that people can recognize the value of the place in that way and participate in it. This is, why we have the wild grape pergola, why we have the sage's seat, why we have the fire pit, why we have the labyrinth, why we have the Torii of the Golden Ice, why we have the pond and the walk and the bridge and so forth. Anyway, so that's very important to me every time that she does that, whether she knows I know that she came by or not. Yesterday, I think, I had a student who I haven't seen more than maybe once since COVID because it's just been Zoom. And he came by, again, not on a schedule, just pulled in. And I was coming out, I was coming out to get the altar ready. I was bringing elements of the altar out. And I'm not sure if candles are still going a bit. We have incense here, candles, a little texadillo, and I said, "Oh, how you doing? Everything okay? Did you need something? And he said, no, I just need to be here. And he's never been a guy who, let's say, will admit to such needs, very in charge and smart and healthy and on top of things and taking care of other people. And so I kind of just sort of checked in, like, do you want to talk? Do you want to Do you want to hear a joke? Do you have something to tell me? Are you sick? Did you just get news about something? Whatever. And we just sort of chatted a little bit on a very surface level. And he said, I just wanted to walk here. And I said, well, please, you can keep walking. I don't want to interrupt your walk. And when we're done chatting, you keep walking, whatever you need to do. But I'm here, and I've since kind of reconnected, texted with him in case he needs something. And it seemed to me that he was finally, I mean, literally studied with me for 15, 20 years, something like that. He was finally ready to, let's say, open up or share or something. And maybe because something really big happened, I don't know yet. Or I don't know, maybe I don't know yet is presumptuous. I just don't know is what we can say. And he seemed like he was just about ready to open up or let go or share or something. I could be wrong about that, but it felt that way. And he kind of danced around and he didn't let me know, but he still wanted to be in the space. He still wanted to walk the space. And he told me he was kind of hoping he might run into me and I'd come out. And maybe he felt shy once I came out about sharing any further, which is okay. But he still felt the value of the physical space. Two more things on my list. I don't know how much longer it'll go. Again, if you have a question, type it in. I'll see if I can get to it. So I was invited to participate in the Gampa's Founders Day. There was Alan and Bob and Yancy and of course John. And it was Zoom because of COVID, so I set up an altar here and sat right here and participated online. And before that, I saw somebody post on one of his pages, Julang Bagwazong page or something. So I'm not even sure who actually, I don't even know if it's somebody I know, but a student of his or a student of his students, whatever. Not whatever, I mean, it's meaningful, but I just don't know. And they posted that there's flowers involved in their ceremony. They have like a yearly ritual. And they posted that when they were, I guess, collecting flowers or something for the ceremony that day, it finally hit them, so anyway, it's not my story to tell, but there's a story about flowers that I've now learned, having participated in the Founders Day. And this person had participated before, so they knew the story, and they were collecting flowers, and then it hit them in a physical way, the difficulty of departing the flowers and the physical connection with the cut flowers. And so they wrote a very moving and eloquent thing about, I'm guessing this lesson that they had heard for 7 years every day of Founders Day, and then this time they intellectually knew it, and they sort of emotionally, physically felt the power of that story, the meaning of that ritual. And I read that, at that point not even knowing the flower story, but I was really, really moved by that. I was like, wow, it's just so glad that they felt vulnerable, and through their vulnerability they were able to share and write. And then after that I heard the story, which made it make a little bit more sense. But it didn't need to make sense. It felt necessary and important. And so then I participated in the Founders Day ceremony, and they started by kind of a reading of the history, to everybody involved. And I thought, wow, that's a really important thing to pass on the art, My art wasn't passed on that way. We never did that. Sometimes I would hear a story from my teacher Bruce about Snake Man. What year? What state? What kind of last name? First name? That's a nickname? I don't. Another time I'd hear a story about Turk. Here's what happened, and here's the form we learned from Turk, and here's a last name, date of birth, was he married? What's his first name for that matter? That's another nickname. So like my history is like Snake Man and Turk and Bruce. And so I'm hearing this history with accurate dates and countries and adopted names and lineages, and I was like, boy, I don't have that. Does it make me wish I had it? In part. Am I happy with how things are for me? Yeah, I'm happy. It's fine. Can I be fine here and also respect and be moved by this other tradition? Yes, I can, to tears. So, they're essentially tell the history, recite the lineage, and then, there's more to the ceremony, but that part was like, boy, I couldn't really do that in my style. That's not something I can do. I don't have that information. Even telling you 1968, like I think that might have been when Bruce started teaching, not certain. And I have little bits and pieces, scraps of paper, and I inherited some stuff from him, and I have my own notes and questions that I asked here and there that I updated my notes, but maybe no more accurate than a poorly revised Wikipedia article. I just don't know. And I'm happy, I'm fine, it's okay. I don't need those answers. But I can respect and be emotionally moved by those that have those answers in their tradition. So the last thing on my list is that I stopped in at a colleague's school, I think 2 nights ago. I think that's right. And I had heard that they were doing a little ceremony, like what I think it was like a certificate ceremony, which I assume was a belt test. And I was around, I was like, oh, maybe I'll just pop in and I'll bow to these 3 gentlemen that have, I was presuming passed their test. And I'll just say hi and bow. It's not my event, but I'm a friend of the school, and one of their teachers is a student of mine. And I thought, I'm free. I'll just pop in. I'll just offer them a bow. And, COVID, probably not even a handshake and hug, but I'll do that, and that's it. Anyway, I stepped in, and they were in the middle of a test, like they're doing chin on, throwing each other around, and everybody's kind of sat up straight, and with their cameras, and these guys are sweating it out, wearing their black belts, testing for I don't know what, second, third degree, I don't really know. They're testing. So I just kind of stay stock still in the back, just here. And I'm there for, a half hour, 45 minutes or whatever it was. And I didn't plan to be there that long. And it was okay, they didn't kick me out, but thankfully they didn't stop it and introduce me or anything either. They just kind of kept it going. And so that was fine. A couple of people quietly said hello, and great. So anyway, to be perfectly honest, I'm going in there thinking, okay, I'm going to go in there and there's going to be these 20-year-old, I don't know their ages, but 17, 23, some whatever, kids, right? Whippersnappers. And I'm going to go in there and they're going to be doing fine. I mean, they're fine. It's fine. It's martial arts. It's fine. It's a kick. It's good memorization, And I'll be polite and I'll bow and I'll see them do their thing, and good for them. I really just hope they stick to it for another 30 years so they can actually use it, And I watch them, and boy, if they weren't impressive in their generosity to each other, their kindness, their commitment, their ability to memorize, obviously their physicality, their athletics, their kindness and care for each other. It was really, impressive to me. And I am not somebody who gets impressed by people, and I'm certainly not somebody who gets impressed by martial artists that are people. I save my feelings of impressiveness for the natural world almost exclusively. But at any rate, I was impressed. Then they call them up, and I don't know if they're going to hand out, certificates or your new belt or something, I don't know. But they call them up and they quiz them. There's 3 guys that are testing. And they ask them, I guess they do sort of a hybrid art. So there's kind of, two, head honchos in their lineage, And they say to one of the fellows testing, tell us a little bit about so-and-so. And I'm just trying not to use the names because it's not important to our talk. And they said, tell us a little bit. And the student says, in 1743, such and such in Tibet, or, whatever, I think it was Korea, but whatever. And then the reason that they founded this art is because they had studied this, and they found it to be that, and therefore they added this, and they became this with this intention, and that's why in 1922, whatever. And I was like, wow, I couldn't do that for my art, even if I had my notepad in front of me. And then they said to the other person, tell us a little bit about this other, founder, or I guess founder would be the word, the progenitor. And the person did the same thing. They said, having studied in Japan and seen this and recognizing that art lacked this, they developed this with this intention behind the art. And that's why in 1942, they began and it became named this. And by the way, that name means this when we translate to English. And that's why, let me demonstrate. Here's a move. See what I mean? And I was like, wow. Again, I couldn't do that. And you're just a kid, and you're publicly repeating the history of the art, which proves you've learned it, and it lets people hear what there is. Through repetition, things get passed down to the next generation. That's kind of the foundation of what our arts are, right? Through repetition, things can be passed down to the next generation. Then they said to the third person, tell us about the founder of our school, right? So we had sort of the founder of the style and the founder of the other style that I guess kind of hybridized and became, what they teach. Or perhaps the truth is that this person and that person, and they actually teach these two arts in the school. I'm not super clear, so sorry about that. But I'm not using the names, so I haven't gotten anything wrong. In my head it might be wrong, but you don't know that. So at any rate, they talked about the two founders, and then they said, tell us about the founder of this school. And there's three people, two founders, and then the school founder. In other words, the beginning of this story. And the person who's the founder of that school is a really dear friend of mine, whose name is Arthur Blair. And then when they asked him that question, I was like, like my heart cracked and my tears welled up, and I was like, whoa. And so, of course, right, the guy says, in 1961, Arthur began studying this, and then he did that, and that's why he founded the school, and he said a few dates, and the reason behind the thing, and when he stopped teaching, and why the school was then passed on, and the school became a nonprofit. There's a little story and all the rest. And I was just crying. I was like, wow, that's like a close friend of mine, and he's not part of the school now. In an official capacity, but he's remembered here publicly, clearly, by somebody who, I don't know, maybe has never met him, I don't know, many years ago now. And that kid is saying, here's how this school began, with this person who has a name and has a date, and here's a bit of the story. And I'm sure each of these persons knew much more story than they told. They just told the bullet point. And I thought, boy, that's not something I do in my school. I don't say, here's my teacher, here's the date, and here's the reason, and here's the how and the why. In fact, very often when I'm teaching, I just say the word teacher. I tell a story about my teacher, but I don't even say who. My students don't know which in my head, I know who I'm talking about, of course, but I have a few different teachers, and I'll just say my teacher, and I know I'm picturing this teacher or that teacher or that teacher. But I don't even pass that on. And again, I'm okay with that. I know why I'm doing it, and it's fine. But it's really meaningful this other way. So those are a couple of different thoughts that I had on that idea of Darśana, about the physical space of practice, about the ongoing legacy of the ancestors, and how we inhabit the physical space, and the ancestors inhabit us when we are sincerely present in our art. So I'm going to check in and see if anybody has asked a question, and I think that's all I have to say. I think I'll probably just bow to my altar here, and so I don't see any questions, although I saw a funny comment, so that was good. So I'd like to bow to you all. I'm Steve Watson. This is Someday Farm. The school that I came from was Silent Dragon School of Kung Fu, or also known as Silent Dragon School of Kung Fu and Tai Chi. My teacher's company is called Waka Inc. And I know precious little beyond that. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Be as good to your art and your students as your art has been to you.